Good evening, everyone. For those who are here in the sanctuary, lovely to have you join us present here. And for all those online who are joining us, welcome to this evening. And it's sure to be a really good and informative time together. And I hope that you will have questions as well ready for Grant, as this is an opportunity to have some questions and have a Q&A time. And really it's about being able to listen and hear some information about the elections, and also to remind us as the church. We're going to, I want to open in prayer, and perhaps at the end, just before we close, to also close in prayer. There is a prayer meeting that's happening next week, Wednesday, at Impact Community Church, where we're going to be gathering as the churches of Edenvale to pray specifically for the elections and what happens afterwards. And so, if you would, I would like to open in prayer. Lord God, I give you thanks for this opportunity we have. I give you thanks for Grant and what he's prepared. And I give you thanks that we can be part of what happens in this beautiful country of ours, in South Africa. And so as we anticipate the elections, and as we do so by preparing and considering who we'll vote for, Lord, this is part of our participation, but it's not the only part. And so we really thank you that you empower us to be part of the community and to work alongside others to make this country a better place. And so this is part of that process. And so would you bless Grant as he speaks, and would you just speak into our minds as we open ourselves to hear and to listen and to reflect. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. For those who may not be aware of Grant's qualifications and coming to share, Grant has been involved in elections throughout Africa, democratic elections for a long time, and I would like to read a couple of those things just to share how he's been involved and where his information and where his expertise comes from. So Grant has spent the past 20 years observing, researching, and supporting democratic elections on the African continent. And since his first election observation deployment in 2004, so 20 years ago, that was when I matriculated, so it's been quite a while, Grant has observed more than 40 electoral processes in 26 African states. And then last year, 2023, he spent 15 months in Liberia, directing an international election observation mission sponsored by USAID. He has acted as a technical advisor to the African Union, East African Community, South African Development Community, European Union, United States government, and the government of South Africa on issues of democracy and governance. And he has also written multiple books and reference volumes on elections and democratic governance in Africa. And he has a master's degree in international relations from Wits University and postgraduate certificates from Carleton University, University of Johannesburg, and Rhodes University. And he is currently embarking on a PhD. Have you started already? There we go. And as well, he is on a journey with starting up his own business called Get Metrics. And so that is in the beginning processes, but yeah, it's wonderful to have you here with us, Grant. He is also married to Mary, and within his household has three children and a father-in-law, and so he is a family man as well, along with all these achievements and all his involvements in various ways with democracy and elections. So welcome, and as well as he's an elder here at Trinity. So it's lovely to have you share your expertise with us. So please, come forward. And the floor is yours. And then after Grant is shared, then we will have some time for some questions and answers. And so we'll keep those until the end. All right. Okay.
Thanks so much, Ian. And thanks for mentioning that I'm an elder. I feel older knowing that you were matriculating when I started. So thanks for that. Hi guys, thanks so much for your interest and for coming this evening. Welcome to all of you. I'm going to try and pitch this at the level that keeps things accessible and that I don't get too technical. But as you've heard, I have been working in this field for a long time, so if I'm going too deep or too technical, start waving at me and I will just rein it in a bit. Thank you, Ian. I gave him my bio. I didn't expect him to read the whole thing, so now I'm blushing a bit. But anyway, it was a lovely introduction by Ian, so thank you for that. So you're all here to hear about the elections, and I'm going to break things down. Now, of course, we tested this earlier, and Ian, it's not working at the moment. So what did I do? Is it working now? Okay, thank you. All right. So 3 things that I want to leave you with tonight. Takeaways. Here's the plan for the evening. How are the 2024 elections different from previous elections? And there are some important differences. Even if you voted every time since 1994 or even before then, there are some differences. It's good to know what those differences are. What are some of the parties promising you, and what is all the talk about coalition governments, and what could this mean if we end up after these elections in a coalition government? 3 things to think about, and hopefully they will help you inform your vote when you go to vote. Having observed many elections, as you've heard, I find the democratic process of elections incredibly inspiring. It's very much a case of you get to see the best of the people of a country during an election. And I'm not talking about that yes, you have standing in a queue and everyone's smiling, because no one's smiling in a queue, not if you're waiting for several hours, not after 1994. But as someone who sits and watches as the voters come through and stream through a station, and they are participating in that democratic process of casting their ballots and expressing their opinion, you get to see the incredible diversity of the electorate in a country. And you also get to see the determination that they have to be a part of their country. And it's a very inspiring thing. So, I'm always inspired by the process of elections, and no matter what the election, I think we should always look for the opportunities to be inspired as an election takes place. So this is a rare opportunity to feel as though as a nation we're all participating in something together, which is a rare experience, unfortunately. But when it happens, hold on to it and enjoy it. Okay, so let me get on to the sections. I don't want to be too long tonight. I want to keep it short so we can all go home and carry on. And so let me get into it. What is new in 2024? There are 3 key things to know about. The first is that we are going to have independent candidates for the first time on the ballot. I'm sure that you've heard some mention of this. It does have some implications for us. The biggest one being, in the past, we've received 2 ballot papers for the national and provincial elections. And for the first time in 2024, we are going to receive a 3rd ballot paper. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. The third thing that is new in 2024 is that in previous elections, we have had the option to change our minds on election day. If you go to a station and there's a long queue and you say, I don't feel like waiting in this queue, and you call your daughter or your mom or whoever, and they say the queue's really short at this other station, and you can just go to that other station and you fill out what's called a Section 24A form and you vote at a different station. That rule has been changed from 2024. You may not do that unless you have filled out the Section 24A form before the elections, and tomorrow, the 17th of May, is the final day to do that. So if you know that you're not going to be at your polling station on election day, you have until tomorrow to make your application, and then you can vote at a different station. But that whole thing of hopping to whichever station is convenient is no longer possible in 2024. Okay, so for the first time in 2024, as a result of a court case by a group in the Northern Cape called the New Nation Movement, we now have independent candidates standing alongside political parties on the ballot paper. We in South Africa have something called a proportional representation system, which was designed primarily with political parties in mind. And that proportional representation system means, in essence, one vote translates to a percentage point towards the total votes. So everyone's votes are essentially put into a single pool, and then from the percentages, the parties get allocated. It doesn't work exactly like that, as I'll show you in a moment, but that's what a proportional representation system does. So if the ANC gets 220 seats, they have submitted a list to the IEC of 220 names. They actually would have had to submit probably about 250 or 300 names for the ANC. And the first 220 names on that list then are sent to Parliament, and those become our MPs. Okay, so that's in a very simple nutshell how a PR system works. When you introduce independent candidates now, you have to change the system slightly, and so that's why we have a new ballot paper in 2024. This is the third ballot paper, the orange ballot paper, because now we have to allow independent candidates to be elected, but the system itself didn't initially get designed with independent candidates in mind. So it has a little bit of an implication. Okay, so we've got 3 ballot papers. You will get 3 on voting day, and here's what they will be. There will be a blue national ballot paper. This will only have political party names and logos on it. There will not be any independent candidates on the blue national party paper. On the orange paper, this is where you will see the presence of both political parties and independent candidates. And this is the paper that I'm sure is going to confuse most people. And so I will try and explain it with a graphic in a moment. But on the blue and the orange paper, you are voting for the national picture. You are voting nationally for both your MP in Parliament, and the orange ballot allows for a calculation to include the independent candidates. As I said, because the system wasn't designed with it, we're now going to have a little bit of an unusual way of calculating seats. Then the pink is going to be for your regional provincial MPs. Every one of the 9 provinces in South Africa has got a legislature, a provincial legislature, and so the pink ballot is going to be for your, we're all in Gauteng here, so it's going to be your Gauteng ballot, or if you're in the Western Cape or KwaZulu-Natal, it's going to be for that particular legislature. But it's the orange and the blue ones and how they interact that's almost certainly going to confuse everyone, because this is what's new. So let me try and breeze through this as fast as possible. We have a 400-seat parliament. That 400-seat parliament is divided into 200 national, what we call compensatory seats, and you'll see why in a moment, and we have regional seats. Now, these regional seats are different to the provincial seats. They're not the same. Okay, these are seats represented from the provinces, but they go to our parliament in Cape Town. So it's the 200 seats that are elected from the region which independent candidates can contest. They are not able to contest the 200 compensatory seats. Let's say that you have 26 million registered voters, and you have, on election day, a turnout of 66%, so you have 18,700,000 voters. You take the 400 seats, and you divide the valid votes that were cast, the 18 million, by 400 plus 1. Don't worry about why the 1 is, it's just there, okay? And then you get a number. You get a number called, which in this case would be 46,634. This is the threshold that a party must get to earn 1 seat in Parliament. It would equate to 0.25% of the votes, right? So this number, 46,634, then becomes the magic number. And then we count the votes, and what we do is we compare what each party has got to work out how many seats. So in our example here, there's a breakdown of various of the parties and what seats they got, and that adds up to that number of 18,700,000. Then the IEC puts it into a calculation using that magic number, the 46,000 number, and they divide the votes for each party in that third column to get the number of seats. Now you'll notice there are fractions in each of those seats because it's not going to be an exact number, and they deal with the fractions in a moment. But the first step is to work out that each party gets roughly this number of seats. Okay, so far so good. This is a very simple PR system, nothing too complicated. Now, unfortunately, it gets less simple and a little bit trickier. So that was the blue ballot paper. And so they've calculated that, and they put those results to one side. And then they take out the orange ballot papers and they count those. And each of the different provinces is assigned a number of seats in the National Assembly based on their population. And so for Gauteng, you can see it would be 48 seats. And they do the same thing. They divide the number of seats plus one. There's that magic plus one again. And they come to another number. In this case, let's say that there were 6,380,000 votes cast in Gauteng. They divide it by Gauteng's 48 plus 1, and the magic number is 130,000 this time. So this is for the orange ballot, which has regional parties and independent candidates on that ballot. And so the calculation happens again where you divide each party's votes into that magic number and you get a number of seats. But now you've got two different sets of numbers of seats. So now this is the part that really confuses everyone. And so I won't dwell on this and linger on this because this turned into a bit of a maths lesson quite quickly. But what they do is they take the first column there, the total party seats out of 400, and they say, according to the blue paper, this is what the results should have been. And then they look at the orange paper and they subtract the number of seats won per party from the orange paper from the value of the blue ballot, the national ballot. Then some parties are going to have too many seats and some are going to have too few. And what they do is they balance the results. That's complicated. The upshot of all of this is that once they've done this process, if you work out the percentages cast in votes for each party, they almost identically align with the number of seats that have been put in Parliament. Okay, so it remains a largely proportional system, but they don't just put all the votes in a hat, calculate the percentage, and assign them to each of the parties. It works a bit differently. And so in the event of an independent winning a seat, then the calculations get thrown off a little bit. And if an independent does win a seat, I'm not sure that there are any strong independent candidates who can get, say, 130,000 votes in Gauteng. But if one were, then you're going to see a lot of head scratching, and you might even hear a lot of accusations that the IEC is cheating or rigging or changing the numbers. And so this is the system that they use. This is, according to the Constitution, correct. And so if you do hear a lot of angst or a lot of anxiety about the way in which it was calculated, the reason is, as I said, there was no anticipation of independent candidates for our particular system. And so this is the way in which we have adapted it to allow for that. So that is how we are going to introduce independent candidates to the elections in South Africa. Then I've already mentioned that there's no vote hopping allowed on election day itself. You are allowed to use the Section 24A form on the IEC's website up to tomorrow and say, I can't be at my own polling station on voting day, I want to vote somewhere else. Up until tomorrow, that's fine. After that, you got to vote where you are registered to vote. Okay, so those are the big changes in 2024. So now I think something that we're all interested in talking a little bit about is, well, what about the political parties? These are the options on the ballot paper. The number of options in our South African elections has been growing election on election. In our 1994 election, there were only 19 options at the national level. This time, there's going to be over 100 options on various of the ballot papers. And there are about 300 registered parties in South Africa. So, the numbers and the options have really grown. And I'm not going to try and cover all of those. We'd be here until Tuesday. I'm going to talk about some that I think are different from one another. And I'm also going to encourage you, as voters, we have the right to be informed and to make an informed choice. That's the voter's right. But we also have a responsibility to inform ourselves. So if the party that you're interested in is not on this list that I cover now, then I can tell you how to go away and look at what that party is promising. And so, there's the rights and there's the responsibilities. So I am not covering all 90-odd of the political parties that will be on the ballot paper. And there might even be some omissions that you might say, well, why not about this party, Grant? There's no reason. I picked some parties. To be honest with you, doing this research took a while, so the ones that made it easier for me to get the answers probably appeared on this list, and the ones that it wasn't so easy may have been left off. But there's no specific bias about which parties I selected here. Okay, let's start with the governing party, the African National Congress. I'm referring largely to the party's manifestos, which is their documents where they promise what they're going to deliver if they are elected in the next 5-year term. So the ANC, you could sum up their election promise as we'll do better, we'll do more, we will do it faster, and we will do it together, which is quite a catchy slogan. I quite like the way they pull all of that together. And as the government, they not only have to promise for the next 5 years, but they also have to justify as the government what they've done in the past. So I think that the first choice any voter has is, are we happy with the way in which the government is handling the country? And if the answer is yes, then we should give them our vote and let them carry on doing the job that we're happy with. Because they are the government, and so you have the most information about what that party will do if they are elected back into power. So you have the most information about what South Africa looks like under the African National Congress. They've, of course, been elected into government every time since 1994, and they will be coming into their 7th term if they're re-elected here. So they've highlighted 6 priority areas. I'm not going to read all 6 for all of the parties, or all 9, or all 13, or whatever. You can see them on the screen there. And frankly, I think that one of the things that's useful to look at as we go through the parties is that many of the parties promise that they are going to deal with the same issues. And the differences between the parties is how they say they're going to deal with them. So the ANC, its manifesto doesn't really suggest that there is going to be any change in the way in which it has governed in South Africa up to this point. The ANC is saying we have a good story to tell, we are proud of our record, and we are going to continue, if you re-elect us, along the trajectory that we have been headed. So that is the ANC's promise, it's continuity. And because, as I said, we know what the ANC government has offered, it's fairly predictable to know then what we would get. If you want to vote for the ANC, then that is what you're voting for, continuity with the current trajectory. So then the official opposition, as they like to call themselves, the Democratic Alliance, they have a very different take on the state of the country. There's no good story to tell. Theirs is very much a doom and gloom scenario. It's really rather depressing reading the DA manifesto. And their takeaway is we have to act, we have to rescue South Africa from collapse. They blame the ANC very predictably for a state of collapse, and they feel as though unless we act right now and unless we act decisively, then it may be too late. So this is what the ANC is, what the DA is saying, and really they are blaming the government for the state of collapse. They are talking about many of the same priority areas as the ANC, the jobs, the electricity, the education, crime, and things like that. The African National Congress, as I said, they're talking continuity. The DA is a party that is can be typically viewed as a market-friendly party. So they like to believe in a small government, a government which gets out of the way and lets business and lets private enterprise carry on, and that the small government also doesn't over-regulate and doesn't constrain the ability of the economy to operate. The ANC has a much more centrist model, and that centrist model means that the government is involved in almost every aspect of societal of society itself. So those are two differences in approach that the ANC and the DA are putting forward. But they all have identified the issues that they believe you as voters are going to find important. And so these are the areas that the DA is promising they will deal with. Okay. Then we have the Economic Freedom Fighters. Their manifesto is quite different to the others that I read, in that it is also more of a philosophical document. It talks about the underlying philosophy of the EFF, yes, but also of class struggle, which is a Marxist concept. If any of you know your political theory, Marxism and sort of black consciousness is littered throughout the EFF manifesto. And so the EFF is very much clear on its idea. The central idea is that black people remain on the margins of economic production, and the EFF, when elected into power, is going to change that. Now, the EFF it doesn't really, the way in which the ANC and the DA very clearly spell out their priority areas, you have to read for meaning a little bit more in the EFF manifesto. It's doing something different. It's having a conversation rather than making a shopping list of promises. But they do talk about jobs, land, ending load shedding. And the way in which the EFF proposes to do this is through nationalization of assets. That means that the state takes over control of the assets in the country. And so that is the EFF's offering. And quite clearly, because of the black consciousness focus and the arguments that despite the 1994 sort of agreement ending in democratic emancipation for black people, the economic emancipation of black people remains unattainable. And so in order to achieve emancipation, the EFF believes the solution is for the state to take control of everything, and presumably then there will be a redistribution of wealth through the nationalization. So this is the Economic Freedom Fighters and their offering. Then we have a new kid on the block. This is their first elections, Rise Mzansi. This is a party, we don't know how big or small it is. We don't know until voters vote. They are a party led by a very charismatic individual who comes out of business and the media, Songezo Zibi. The party has certainly been working hard for a good couple of years, engaging with communities at the local level, and they have established themselves in some places with a real conversation by the Rise Mzansi teams about what are the issues of local communities. And so Rise Mzansi takes a different view to the DA, even though their solutions are fairly similar in their sort of framing. They don't believe that it's all doom and gloom in South Africa. What they're saying is that the problem is that we're not getting the basics right. Okay, so we have good ideas. There's nothing wrong with the ANC's ideas. The ANC just has failed to put them into practice. Okay, so it's about implementation rather than ideas. And very often I think that, politicians are going to try and sell you the new idea as a quick fix. And a party like this is saying, we don't need a quick fix. We know what we need to do. We just need to get on and do it. And we need to go back to basics. So this is a party that believes the ANC has done some things well. They also think that the ANC has dropped the ball on some things. And they believe that the way in which we can move forward from here is to go back to focusing on the basics. So this is Rise Mzansi. As I said, we don't know how popular this party is until the voters have voted, but they've certainly been very energetic and very active. They have a very dynamic group of people campaigning for them at the local level. The Freedom Front Plus, on the other side, this is a party which typically has a sort of an Afrikaner nationalist identity. I think they would object to that particular characterization. They say we're more than just that. We're a full-blown political party with a full range of ideas. But there's no doubt that the extent to which they draw their support from the Afrikaner community and the policies that they talk about putting forward definitely have an element of preserving culture and preserving heritage and preserving language mixed into the usual policies about eradicating poverty and improving education levels, etc. Something that I find very interesting about the Freedom Front Plus and the IFP, the Inkatha Freedom Party, which I'll talk to in a second, is that they are different groups, but they have a very similar offering. When you compare them, they're just talking to different national identity groups. So oftentimes they're talking about the same things, about native language education or home language education, and the preservation of culture and tradition. But the Freedom Front Plus has been seeing something of a resurgence in the last couple of elections, and certainly their support base seems to be growing slowly, but growing in the last couple of elections once more. So the IFP that I mentioned, the Inkatha Freedom Party, this is a party that is very, very strong in the heartland of KwaZulu-Natal. They are like the Freedom Front Plus, a party with a nationalist identity, but very much about the Zulu heritage, the Zulu language, respect for Zulu chieftains and the Zulu king and the Zulu kingdom. And I think, again, the IFU would say we are more than that. They do actually campaign countrywide, and they have good support outside of Zulu areas. But there is no doubt that the majority of their success as a party lies in KwaZulu-Natal. The IFP has been in every government since 1994, and they have consistently been either the third or the fourth largest party. And in this election, they will be led not by their historical leader, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who was the leader of the party for a very long time, but they now have a new leadership, and they're trying to attract voters back to the party in KwaZulu-Natal. Okay, then Action SA. This is not such a new kid, but it's a more recently new party, Action SA, and their offering is quite similar to Rise Mzansi, but they just frame it in a different way. They say, we, through our leader, Herman Mashaba, who has political experience as the mayor of Johannesburg and is a very experienced businessman, we can fix SA through action. We know what it takes. We've got to roll up our sleeves, get some action going, and so Action SA is yours. And they, I think, are less kind on the African National Congress's record than maybe Rise Mzansi is. They are less sympathetic. They do, however, agree with Rise Mzansi that the main issue to fix South Africa and get things going is about implementation and getting back to work and getting action underway. They talk about their values, their non-racialism, social justice, quality education. Most of the parties, you're not going to disagree with any of the things that they promise you. The real question is, how are they going to do it? So for Action SA, it's very much about we're going to be a party of action, a party who gets to work. Okay. So that was some of the parties. Now, as the number of parties in South Africa has grown, the absolute majority of the ANC has shrunk. Over the course of several elections, the ANC's majority has come down from 69% down closer and closer to 50% plus one vote. If you get to that position where you are below 50% of the vote, then you do not have the ability to elect a government. So what is going to happen then? So if the ANC doesn't get 50% plus one seats in the National Assembly, so that's 201 seats, then the ANC as a party cannot decide who our next Speaker of Parliament and who our President will be. And so what happens then? Well, then you have to have a coalition government, and that means that two or more parties need to make an agreement to vote in the bloc together, and then you will have enough votes in the National Assembly to form a government. In the polls, and I'm sure people have heard that there have been polls and predictions about what the ANC's results might be. There have been polls that have put the ANC support in the low 40s for this election. Now, we see these kind of polls every election, and there is a degree of inaccuracy about polls. So just because the polls say the ANC might get as low as 40% does not mean that's the case. And also, the closer you get to the election, we see these numbers for the ANC rise as undecided voters typically decide, you know what, we'll give the ANC another shot. So as we've been seeing in the last few weeks, these polls that come out have been saying this, that the ANC is now polling at 45 or 46%, and we've still got a bit of a ways to go. So one thing is clear is that the expectation is that the ANC is likely to be very close to 50% of the vote, which means that it's important to talk about what coalition governments mean and what we're looking at there. So let me just start with a couple of things. The experience of coalitions in South Africa has not been a good one. We have coalitions in various of the metros, and the sense is that these coalitions have led to chaos and the breakdown of service delivery. I talk to a lot of clever people in the democratic governance space, and the consensus when we talk to one another is that this is a false narrative driven by parties for their own ends. The reality is that democratic governance was struggling before coalitions. There were many municipalities which had a single party, usually the ANC, in power. And the delivery of services in those, when there was just one party in power, has not gotten any worse, and it hasn't gotten any better. So the idea that coalitions themselves are inherently problematic is not true. And in actual fact, in many, many countries around the world, this is the type of governments that you have to make peace with. I was with the Belgians recently talking about how they took 589 days to form a government in that country because they couldn't find the numbers to make the government work. And so it took them 589 days without a government. And clearly that's not a great scenario for any country. And it can't happen in South Africa. I'll tell you why in a moment. But yeah, coalitions are the way of the world, and South Africa is now most likely, if not in this election, certainly in a future election, entering into this space of coalitions. So whether we feel happy about it, whether we feel nervous about it, it's coming. It's the reality. And understanding that parties are going to tell you it was the other party's fault, or these coalition arrangements don't work, you should vote for us and only vote for us. There is nothing in the political literature or the political research to support the idea that coalitions are worse inherently than a single party government. And because we are likely to have one, it does mean we don't need to panic. It's going to be a rocky ride because it will be the first time we might have a coalition government at national level. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's time to head for the hills or run away or bury our heads in the sand. Okay. As I said, there's been a lot of fear-mongering and doom and gloom about the idea of coalitions. And this has really been driven by political parties. It does serve their interests as a campaigning tool to persuade you, the voter, that voting in the wrong way will lead to coalitions, and it will be your fault if we end up in some sort of nightmare scenario. That is not true. Vote for the party that you think is the right party for you, and let the coalitions sort themselves out. This idea that you must vote for a party that has a chance of winning to keep some other party out, that is just misdirection by the parties. Please do not fall for that ruse. That is people trying to make you scared so that they can hold on to your vote from fear. And because we don't believe in the church that we are governed by a spirit of fear, you should vote with a spirit of hope and with optimism, and do not let that fear be the influence why you do or don't vote for the party that you like. Okay. But there are some valid risks with a coalition. I'm not going to say that there aren't. And I think the most of them are that we've never had one before. So we are likely to have some scenarios occur which we've never seen in South Africa and which we don't know how to handle. And of course, the politicians themselves will not know how to handle them either. And so you can expect to see some uncertainty, even some legal challenges to certain things in the coming weeks and months, if we were to go into a coalition. Two very interesting examples. One is that the Constitution of South Africa says that once the official results of the elections have been announced, we have 14 days to elect the Speaker of Parliament and the President of the country. 14 days. That means from the time that the parties know that there is no majority government, they have got exactly 14 days to come up with a coalition agreement. That is complex negotiation and horse trading, and that's not a lot of time. 14 days is a very short time. So it may be that we will get to the 14 days and people will start to throw around a word like constitutional crisis, that we have gotten to 14 days, the Constitution calls for a government to be constituted, and maybe the parties haven't sorted out who's going to be in a coalition yet. That is a possibility, and that's going to cause a lot of nervousness. It doesn't mean the world is ending. It doesn't mean that South Africa is about to collapse. You don't need to sell your shares in South Africa Inc., but it is a risk, and it might cause some turbulence. Okay, so that's one aspect. And the other aspect that we're also not sure of, because it's never happened before, is that we believe that you need 201 votes to elect the president. But there are some people who are saying the Constitution does not explicitly say you must have the president elected by 201 votes. In every election up to now, the ANC has had more than 200 votes, and those 200 votes plus one have gone to the ANC candidate. So we've always had our president elected by 200 plus one votes and more. In this event, though, you might have a situation where the candidate with the most votes only has 180 votes, if there are 3 or more candidates, for example. And it's not clear to everyone. Some people say it's perfectly clear they must have 201 votes, but not to everyone, that you need to have 201 votes to be elected as president. So these are some of the things that you might see some arguing about if the coalitions form and they can't agree. So there might be some turbulent times ahead. But that's where we're at. Okay. In conclusion, I haven't told you who to vote for, because that wasn't what I was going to do here tonight. I've given you some things to think about, and I hope that they've been helpful. But I want to leave you with something I do hope is helpful. A very cool quote that I came across recently. I'm going to read it out. Voting is not marriage. It's public transport. Don't wait for the one who is absolutely perfect. You're getting the bus. If there isn't one going to exactly your destination, don't stay home and sulk. Take the bus, which will get you as close to where you want to go as possible, and that's good enough for now. Okay. A lot of parties want you to be married to them, because that means your vote is safe. But if you think about voting as marriage or as loyalty, or even the example that's often used is, loyalty to a sports team. Oh no, my sports team, I love them. I will support them through thick and thin. If they're doing well, if they're doing badly. That's not how politics works. That's not how you should think about your vote. Think about, for right now, which of the parties is talking to your interests. And in 5 years' time, if you voted for them and that bus took you in the wrong direction, hop off that bus and find another bus that you hope will take you in the right direction. That's my thoughts to leave with you. Ian's going to take over for the floor now. I hope that was interesting and helpful. Thanks, Ian.
Great. Thanks very much, Grant. Really appreciate it. And a lot of information to process. So this is a time to ask questions. The only real question that I will not allow is, who do we vote for? As Grant has said, he's not telling us who to vote for. As a church, we're not saying who you need to vote for. It is something that you need to decide based on the information that is there. But other questions are welcome. And for those who are online, if you would like to ask a question, just put a comment on the video, and I will try and keep a tab on that, and then I can ask Grant that question from here. All right. So let's start with from anyone who's perhaps present here, if there are any questions. There's one at the back, and I'm going to come to you with a microphone just so that those who are online will also be able to hear the question, and that those who are present can hear the question clearly.
Hi, thanks. Hi, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. In the situation of there being a coalition, or having to be a coalition, and the 14 days comes, whose decision is it to then elect a president and a speaker? Who does that? Thanks.
Shall we take them one at a time? Is that how are we going to do it, Ian?
Well, let's take that.
Okay,
Are there
lovely.
any others? I hadn't seen any other hands up. So
Let me answer that, and Rob can ask his question after that, because I think it's a straightforward question. If we don't have an elected parliament after 14 days, then it is possible to get extensions. There will need to be involvement of our constitutional court, and there may need to be a political agreement between all parties. So, in other words, the existing parliament might pass a special vote to extend the time period to allow for it. But of course, the entire time that the coalition negotiations drag on, like was the case in Belgium, your government is not really able to act. So the longer this process goes on for, the more serious it becomes. So none of us really are hoping to see an extended or dragged out negotiation period which delays the formation of the 7th Parliament. But you can't have someone else than the voters deciding to elect the president. The people who were elected into Parliament through the elections are the only ones who can elect the new president and the new Speaker of Parliament. There just might be some legal processes that delay things a little bit, but no one else can elect it except the people who we have elected in these elections. Those are the only ones who can choose our president. They can get involved in allowing extensions. So the question was, the Constitutional Court can't get involved. No, they cannot get involved to elect the president. No one but the MPs who were elected by us, the voters, has that right, and that will not change no matter what.
Grant, there seems to be several parties established with a religious basis, and a lot of the parties have a throwaway line here and there on religion. How have you experienced religious parties in Africa? How have they done? And what can the voters make of them typically?
That's a great question, Rob. Thank you. The African Christian Democratic Party, I think, is the most well-known and I think the longest established of these parties. But yes, there are a number of parties who form along these religious lines. And in South Africa, the majority religion being Christian means that there are. But of course, there are also Muslim parties who identify with a Muslim identity, and even other parties as well who identify with more traditional beliefs as a set of religious beliefs. And I think that the beauty of our system is it allows for those people to be represented in the parliament alongside others. And my take on the introduction of religion into politics is that it's very, very difficult to play the game of politics and hold fast to a set of principles. Unfortunately, politics is not particularly principled, and you do need to compromise here, there, and everywhere. As Christians, I think if you hear Ian preaching from the pulpit about compromising our values, we need to start listening more carefully to what kind of teaching he is teaching, because in many ways, when Jesus came to us, he was giving us a very uncompromising message, a very firm sort of hold fast to the teachings of the gospel. And so it's sometimes difficult for particularly Christian religious parties to operate in that environment. But of course, if you like their offerings, the parties like the ACDP have served in every parliament as well, except the first parliament. And they do actually focus quite a lot on the representation of the Christian in the parliament. So they very often come at particular issues that are being debated in parliament with a sort of biblical perspective as they see it. And of course, the question as well is, there are different interpretations sometimes as Christians that we see things, and that's where it gets a bit muddy. So it's a tricky question to answer. But if you like the offerings of a sort of a religious party, then because we in our system we allow for all of these parties to exist in Parliament at the same time, then your vote is not wasted because you get representation there, and even the small parties get time to speak, they get time to offer bills up for consideration. And so if you like that kind of party, by all means, vote for that party. And like I said, see them as a bus. Did they get you where you wanted to go? If yes, great, keep voting for them. If not, hop off and find another bus.
Thanks, Grant. You mentioned a number of about 300 parties or up to 300 parties, and I assume that they have to meet certain criteria to get onto the ballot sheet. I'm wondering, with those blue and orange and pink sheets, you mentioned the number 90, and being someone who can be very easily overwhelmed, are you telling me there are going to be 90 names on each sheet?
No, not on each sheet, no.
Okay.
No. Each of the ballot papers is going to have a different number on it. I don't have the numbers on the top of my head, but yes, this ballot paper, unfortunately, is going to be the most overwhelming ballot paper you've seen since 1994. The 1994 ballot was an A4 page. It was very easy. Whereas this one here, it's a bigger page. It's 2 columns. You're going to have to sort of search for the party that you're trying to find. So yes, there are a lot of options on the paper this time. And as I said earlier, there's been a lot of fear-mongering from parties that have said, don't split the vote, consolidate the vote. That's a very self-serving narrative, because the reality is your vote is never wasted. There are a lot of people who say, if you vote for a small party, you are wasting your vote. That is not true. It's completely self-serving propaganda from parties who want to cause fear and make you feel like it's A or B. You're either A or B. That suits their narrative. That's not true. You have A, B, C, D, all the way down to 90 parties. Now, that can feel overwhelming, but it is choice. And your vote is not wasted. Even if you vote and your party doesn't get a seat in Parliament, it's still not wasted. But I'm not going to go into the technicalities of why here. The point is, vote for who you want to vote for. There is no such thing as a wasted vote in our system, which is actually great.
Grant, thanks for your discussion. One of the things that fascinated me is that, particularly in the ANC's past with Zuma, there was a lot of state capture and corruption. And in all the manifestos, it was only the EFF Plus, and I think it was Action SA, said ethical government. Am I missing something, or all the parties saying that holding people accountable for corruption really isn't important? Am I missing something?
Not if you're listening to the campaigning, but I think you are spotting something on the manifesto side, is that the way in which the parties are talking about dealing with the issue of corruption, it's not necessarily straight in your face, we're going to deal with corruption. And it's an interesting question, again, to pick up on. But the election is trying, what I see, and this is now an interpretation, so this is not fact, this is me interpreting, is that the parties have picked the issues they believe will land with the voters to the greatest effect. And I think that there is a lot of South Africans who are really tired of hearing about promises to deal with corruption. And actually, it's not polling very well when these pollsters for the parties go out and say, which are your sort of hot topic issues, etc. A lot of people who are hearing will deal with corruption are going, yeah, Zondo, we heard all about this, no action, stop wasting our time. We're tired of that. There's unfortunately for many of us, we are tired of hearing promises to deal with corruption and nothing is happening. But there are, in those offerings, most of the parties do campaign on the campaign trail and mention corruption and dealing with it. It's perhaps not sort of explicitly articulated in all of their manifestos. Very interesting observation there. Yeah.
Hey, thank you again on behalf of everybody. I've been out of the country for about 2 decades now.
Welcome back.
And I've got 2 what I think are very simple questions. Number 1 is I didn't see the FF Plus on the website when I was downloading their manifestos. Is VF the same as FF Plus? That's question number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then is Al-Jama Muslim?
Yeah, okay. Sometimes the simplest questions are the hardest ones to answer. But yes, the FF Plus is the same as the VF Plus, which are both interchangeably used, the English or Afrikaans versions of that name. So that one is relatively simpler. And yes, Al-Jama is a party which identifies broadly with the faith of Islam. In the same way that there are Christian parties which associate with the identity but are not necessarily Christian parties. That is Al-Jama. Al-Jama is actually a very interesting party that does a lot of social work, social concern work in the communities where it is active, as sort of charity work. And it is sort of interfaith. It's very happy, Al-Jama, to work across the faith boundaries. So they're not an exclusive or exclusionary Islamist party in that way. Yeah.
You can do a follow-up question.
Beg your pardon, everybody. I watched the guy from Al-Jama, and when he was saying he'd be happy to support, this is from my opinion, so it's not your opinion, is that it seemed to me that he would be more happy to back up parties that are red, being red and green, if you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I mean, parties have the right to declare at this point in time that they will most likely align. And frankly, because we know where the positions of the parties are, they've had to declare it. It's a fairly easy thing to work out in sort of the spectrum of where political parties lie, who naturally fits together easily and who are sort of less comfortable bedfellows if they have to coexist in a coalition government. And there are lots of different scenarios. The Social Research Foundation, led by Frans Cronje, has gone through some of the scenarios of what is possible to happen after the election in coalitions. So what does an ANC-DA coalition look like? And what needs to happen for that to come true? What does an ANC-EFF coalition look like? And what needs to happen for that to come true? What happens if, for example, and I didn't mention this party previously, ANC, EFF, and MK are the parties who can form a coalition together. And so the Social Research Foundation, they go into that hard politics and speculation. It's all just theory. But Frans Cronje, who leads that organization, likes that kind of speculation, and they do a good job of giving you some thoughts about which parties might align with the others. From your perspective as the voters, it's good that parties say, if you vote for us, we will support the ANC in a coalition, or we will support the DA in a coalition. It's good to know, because you're voting from an informed choice. What's tough is that you think you've taken the bus that's taking you to Edenvale, and it takes you to Alexandra by taking your votes and going and joining with someone you had no idea that they would join to. And that might happen. That might happen in these elections. Yeah.
I've got one from online here, and it asks, how many independent candidates do we have in Gauteng, and do you know anything about some of the more popular ones?
No, I don't know a lot about the independent candidates. The challenge for all the independent candidates is getting any kind of profile and getting their message out there. It's hard enough with 90 political parties on the ballot paper. Now, I'm speaking under correction, so here's where it's tough that I'm online and this is recorded. But my understanding is that it's one candidate in Gauteng who is an independent candidate. There are, I believe, 2 in the Western Cape. There are a couple in other places as well. But apart from that, I don't know very much about them. So I can't offer very much about the independent candidates. What I can do is talk to what it would mean if you elect an independent candidate. If I stand as an independent candidate, I am standing on my personal reputation with you. And that means that you must elect Grant to Parliament, and Grant is the one going. If you elect the ANC, and the ANC chooses to remove someone from their list, let's say Grant was number 1 on the list, and then you vote for the ANC and they get 1 seat, but the ANC as a party can recall me and put someone else in. So one of the things that you know with an independent candidate is that that exact person that you voted for will end up in Parliament. The question is, how effective is an independent candidate by themselves going to be? That's 1 vote out of 400 in Parliament. And the expectation is that the independent candidates will have to align themselves on issues based on what they think the voters who voted for them would support. And they will need to align themselves with the parties and say, yes, I'll vote with you on this one, but no, I won't vote with you on that one because that's not in alignment with my values. So it's going to be tough if there are independent candidates to evaluate their impact. But I think it's going to make a healthy contribution to our democracy to have 1 or 2 independent candidates. And I think going forward, we are likely to have several in future elections. So I do think independence will become a feature, but maybe not. Maybe 2024, it's still too new, and people haven't quite figured this out yet. Yeah.
Perhaps I can ask a follow-up question on that. Is there any way to find information about the independents, or and
yes,
other political parties?
Yes, if you want to find out information about the independent candidates, then you can go to the IC lists. So the IC has listed all of the candidates on their website, which is a fabulous website, and then the names of the independent candidates in each of the regions are there. As for whether there is information about the specific independent candidates further than their name, I can't speak to that. But I have looked up a couple, and the media, I think, have been interested in a few of these independent candidates, so you might find media profiles on them as well, but I can't guarantee it. I can tell you that even some of the parties don't have websites. You have to go to a Facebook page or an Instagram page to find any information about some of the parties. And so it might be the same way with independents. But start at it's www.elections.coza. That's the IC website, and that's where you can find the names of independent candidates.
I don't know whether this is the right forum for it, but do you think the scrapping of e-tolls and this NHR signing the bill are election employees?
I think there's plenty of forum for that. It's good questions, Dave. So the ANC is polling very poorly, as we know. It's polling below 50%. So for the first time since 1994, there is a prospect of the ANC not winning a majority of the votes. And it's not uncommon in any country where a party is watching its popularity sort of collapse, as the ANC's popularity has clearly collapsed over several elections, to resort to ploys which give it what we call a dead cat bounce, which can kind of just pull it up enough at the time of the elections to maybe get across the line. And so something like the scrapping of the e-tolls and the timing of when it is scrapped, or certainly even more recently, the signing of the NHI bill, many people do believe that these are sort of enticements to sway voters who were maybe undecided. What I haven't talked about at all here tonight, and maybe I was remiss in not doing so, is that the biggest voting bloc in the 2019 elections didn't vote for the ANC. They voted for no one. There were more voters who did not vote in 2019 than voted for the ANC. And so getting some of those voters who are not voting to come back and vote will clearly be to the benefit of a party if they can pull them in. And so something like the scrapping the e-tolls or the NHI may very well be tactics by the government to entice some voters to come back. What they do as a party, what the government does in government, I mean, as long as they don't break the law, is really up to the government. The choice that you have remains. Is that the bus that you want to take you on for the next 5 years? You know, that choice doesn't really change. If you see the sort of signing of the NHI as something that you support, and you're glad they did that, well then jump on that bus.
We've got one other from online. What is the Moonshot Pact and how does it affect the upcoming elections?
Okay, thank you. Earlier I spoke about how there was a narrative that voting for smaller parties is a wasted vote. The Moonshot Pact is a pre-election alliance spearheaded by the Democratic Alliance, and it is the formation of several parties, some of whom were also on that list there, who have agreed as a set of parties, if elected with enough votes to form a government, they will work together. So coalitions are the formation of enough votes in Parliament after an election to form a government. A Moonshot Pact alliance is something where before the election, those parties are declaring to you, the voter, if you vote for this party or this party or this party, we're all planning to work together in the 7th Parliament if you give us enough votes to form the government. In fact, my understanding is that win or lose, the Moonshot Pact intends to work together in the 7th Parliament after these elections, one way or the other. So it's an alliance which would most likely, if you vote for any of the members of the Moonshot Pact, and there are several of them, the most likely outcome of your vote would be if they get enough votes to see the leader of the DA, John Steenhuisen, as the new president of South Africa.
Any other? There you go.
I'm pretty inquisitive this evening. A hypothetical. If people are counting, and there's a number of small parties, and they don't feel like doing the paperwork, and they think, okay, there's only about 100, we'll split them up and group them into other parties. Is there any way to, is there any comeback on that? Is there any way to have a source to prevent that from happening?
Okay, thank you. The answer is very simple on that one. That can't happen. The Independent Electoral Commission is governed very, very strictly by laws and by regulations on how the votes for a party that say you only get 100 votes in the entire country, what happens to those votes. And if you looked at the calculation in more detail, maybe I can share the PowerPoint slides with you and you can go and study it, or you can go to the IEC website where the same calculation is described. The way in which the IEC deals with fractions of votes is very, very clearly laid out, and they can only do one thing with them. There's the scenarios that you're talking about. People might accuse the IEC of doing it, but they cannot do it. And the results are audited at the end of the day. They undergo an audit process, and there are lots of international and local observers who are also watching them very closely. On election day, I will be at the results center itself, along with lots of other people who understand how the stuff works, and we'll be making sure that the IEC does what they are required to do by law. But the IEC is a fantastic institution. They really do what they are supposed to do, what the law says they should do. They often do it while being criticized by everyone, and I think that you don't need to worry about, funny business with the count. The IEC is going to do a good job. I'm confident of that. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Grant. Any other questions?
Thanks so much for the questions, guys, and very interesting talking with you.
And thank you, Grant. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your preparation and for the opportunity to be able to do this here, and for giving yourself for that. So we really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And we are potentially looking at having another opportunity to do this just before the election on a Sunday evening. So that's a Sunday just before the actual elections. And so if you have people who are interested, or if you share this with someone and say, oh, we had this evening, maybe you can tell them that we're planning on having another session like this. And please also speak to me if people show interest, so that we can, because we'll be talking and saying, well, do we go ahead with it, or do we feel that this has been enough? So please do chat. So let's pray, and then we'll say goodbye to those who are online. And so, loving God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather, to ask these questions, to apply our minds to these elections. And we really desire for peaceful elections. We desire that coming through it, that it would lead to change and that it will lead to a better South Africa. Whether that is with coalitions or whether that is with a single party in governance. We desire that there would be a better South Africa for all people. And so we want to be part of that, and we thank you that as we trust in you, Lord Jesus Christ, that we become part of that and seeing that happen within our country. In Jesus' name, amen. For those who are online, go well, and we hope that you have been able to participate and enjoy participating with us. And so God bless. Anyone else has any questions?